to meeting the others.
Yes. Okay, so I guess I'll just be alphabetical because that seems fair. So Sarah, you're going to be first because we'll start alphabetical by last name. I wanted to do this because, you know, I'm hearing about all the riots and all the, you know, just bad stuff happening. People just so angry and lashing out at each other, and, you know, this whole, you know, business with the police and all kind of, you know, negativity kind of stuff going on. And wait a minute. It's a podcast. I need my microphone. Oh my God. Sorry. Getting ahead of myself here. All right. So while I'm doing that, I tried to get some folks who have a little bit different background and maybe have a little bit different perspective, just to keep things interesting. So Sarah, you know, I invited you because Sarah was adopted and raised by white parents. So, and has kind of do you have one black sister and one white sister? Is that right? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
I have actually 7 siblings.
What?
And two are step siblings who are Italian American white people, and I have a brother who is half Irish and half Polynesian, a brother who is half Italian and half African American, a sister who is African American, a sister who is Cape Verdean, and my parents had a biological child who is a white, lovely young girl.
Wow.
The baby of the family. So we have a beautiful family with just a lot of different nationalities and ethnicities that we are able to draw from.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so of our 6, 5 of us were adopted. And then years later, after my father died, my mother remarried a gentleman who had 2 children of his own. So now there's 8 of us.
Oh,
amazing. Okay.
Wild house.
Yeah. And I wanted Lucky to join us because he wasn't born in the U.S. So, Lucky, are you able to talk? I see you driving there.
No, I'm good. So technically, on a technicality, I was born here, but I moved away really young, and I was raised in the Caribbean. So I didn't move to the America until I was 18. So I was raised completely in the Caribbean islands. But my parents are both Caribbean, so they intentionally made sure we were born here so that we would be citizens, and then raise us in the Caribbean so that we didn't have to. We were from Jamaica, Queens, New York. So as you know, that's like one of the hubs right now of where this is going down. And then my parents kind of had the foresight to make sure that we didn't have to go through what we're currently protesting about.
And Ionie's still on mute, so I think we're going to have to skip her alphabetically. But so Kimle, I consider you to be like a thought leader and just a vocal, very well read kind of, you know, like you just have you understand the news, you understand what's happening, you have an excellent understanding of all the whatever. I respect you. I think a lot of you. And right now, Kimle is the president of NABWIC, the National Association of Black Women in Construction. So anyway, Kimle, you take over and you explain about yourself and your perspective.
Well, again, thank you for having me this evening, Chris.
Thank you for being our whole. This is Kimle's Zoom line.
Anyway, well, Sarah, I'm from a family of 10. That was the same mom and dad. We don't have any diversity. Just 10 of us. So we have a large family. I love our large family.
It's fun.
This whole quarantine has made me miss them more. We get together the first Sunday of every month. So I am here at my sister's home. She's celebrating her 60th birthday. So if you hear a little jazz playing in the background or a little laughter that's coming through the window, I did come inside away from the crowd, but I think this amazing time in which we live, where we're being forced to recognize our true identity and that there is a human race. And since we're all on lockdown and we all witnessed a murder and the atrocity of all that, just seeing it happen, I think it's just made us all be present with ourselves a little more than we typically would be. We're not distracted. So we're forced to have this conversation. You know, a lot of people say, well, it just seems untimely right after quarantine. I said, no, it's very timely because when we leave this quarantine, we cannot go out into the world in the same craziness we've done for the last hundreds of years. So our timing is not God's timing, but this is perfect timing for some introspection and to say, where do we go from here and how do we really honor the diversity that we are? I mean, we have different species of flowers and different species of animals and trees. Only the human species that has diversity amongst itself gets crazy. So we got to fix that. We have the honor and privilege to fix that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I'm honored to be a part of the conversation today.
I'm very grateful that you're here. Thank you, Kimle. Ionnie, are you ready? Looks like you got your headphones on. So I tried to have a mixture of like ages and, you know, just like backgrounds and stuff like that. And so Ionnie's from the younger contingent. And, you know, Ionnie, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but one of the ways I think about you is that you maybe invite people to underestimate you. Would you say that's true?
Very much so. Very much so.
And so I thought that perhaps that experience of being underestimated would give you the perspective that, some perspective to bring to this conversation. Would you introduce yourself for anyone that didn't hear your podcast episode?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Ionnie. I like to just say Ionnie, like a one-named artist. But what else you want me to say? I mean, I heard everybody else, kind of like the family you come from. I have 2 African-American parents. I wrote a paper actually about them when I went to Howard. If I had to describe them, I would say that my father is a lot like W.E.B. Du Bois, and my mother is a lot like Booker T. So that kind of tells you the environment that I was raised. I do have an older sister who is 12 years older than me, which also means that I was treated like an only child, which would also tell you a lot about me. But I'm also a baby, which would also tell you a lot about me. And I would say I almost pulled out of this conversation after I said yes. I haven't really talked about or comment on this a lot since, or at all really, since all of this stuff has popped off. Kind of intentional. One, because I haven't really been that glued into it. And 2, I don't really want to raise my blood pressure about it. So that's my perspective a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't think what I hope is that we can just all be very honest and open, but everybody on the call is someone who's maybe passionate about things, but not in like a, we're not going to be coming to blows here. Everybody's mellow, everybody's chill, and respectful of each other and in general, positive people. So that's another criteria for being invited to the conversation. Oh, Wyman's coming. Woohoo. So you're in lucky because I said, oh my God, Lucky's the only man on the panel. So Wyman is gonna join us and he'll give you a little support. Hello, Wyman. Perfect timing. Oh, he's not on audio yet. Hello.
There I am. Hey, good afternoon, everybody.
Perfect timing, Wyman. Oh man, we just got finished introducing ourselves. Well, not me, obviously, but we were just sort of saying our backgrounds and why we, you know, I guess a little bit about ourselves. The main reason I invited you to be on the panel is because you're a male, and I didn't want Lucky to feel completely overwhelmed with women, and because you have the right energy, you know, like this, you know, a calm energy, but also very open and honest. And I hope we're not going to pull any punches here. The reason I have Kimle's name is because I'm signed in under her account because we're using her Zoom account.
Okay.
So
I'm just saying, on your thing, you could actually change the way your name's reflected.
Isn't Kimle's going to change too if I do that?
No.
Oh,
No.
good. Oh, good. Okay. Well, I'll rename myself.
Yeah, is it possible to do that from myself?
Yes. The 3 little dots of your little picture. Just hit that and rename.
All right. Now we're different. Okay. Thank you.
I don't see it on mine. I'm going to stay Coach Kimle tonight. So. That's the purpose of this line when I'm coaching my clients anyway. So.
At least you're the real Kimle.
This is the
Yes.
real deal right here.
So Wyman, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and basically we're trying to solve racism today. That's
a small order.
We got an hour, so.
Yes, well, I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, just up 95 from Ionnie there. He's a little bit further south in Florida than I am. I've been here for 30 years, complement to the Navy. I spent 8 years active duty and 22 years as a reservist. I retired with 30 years in 2012. But when I left active duty, I joined IBM, and I'm in my 31st year at IBM. Wow. I'm in my 24th year as a lay minister. I'm the pastor of men at our church at the Bethel Baptist Church in Jacksonville with Bishop McKissick Jr. as the senior pastor. So I've been leading our men's ministry there. And I'm a speaker. I do a lot of work with the Department of Defense, Yellow Ribbon, working with our pre and post deployment Guard and Reserve. And 31st year of marriage. Rosemary and I have been married 31 years now. We have 3 kids, all of them out of college. Yes, that is a good thing. But for those who haven't gotten there yet, there's a difference between out of college and out of your pocket. I'll just leave it there.
Make that distinction clear.
Thank you, Wyman.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
So I guess we'll start off with the easy questions first. Why do you think there is this this tendency toward racism? And it's not just racism, you know, I mean, I've done, you know, a lot of, like, for example, when the corona first hit, there was a lot of violence against Asians. Like, they personally brought the coronavirus over, you know, there's sort of like, it seems like it's maybe for some folks, their first reaction is like, oh, it's their fault. Let's go get them, you know? Why do you think we're like this? And anybody can, you know, what I want to happen is that I'll step away from this conversation and it's going to take on a life of its own. So please just, I'll stop it if it gets like out of control, you know, and everybody's talking on each other, but please feel free to just, you know.
I do want to make the first comment.
Okay.
I'm going to invoke an ancestor in this question. And Dr. Frances Cress Welsing did say, if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, everything else will just confuse you. So anybody else can pick up that panel. Somebody's probably going to go back to the start of America, but I did just want to invoke an ancestor to answer that question.
This is Kimle. I'll chime in on that. And that was very fundamental. Like she said, if you don't understand the basics of those 2 key factors, then this is a mute conversation. And in addition to that, we have to be willing to accept the fact that there's some deprogramming required. We have been conditioned behaviorally, and we don't like to face the fact because we like to believe we're, self-actualized thinkers, but we're not. We're just like, sheep being led astray to the slaughter in many cases, and we just go along with protocol. And I think what's going to change us in our behaviors when we get honest to say we need to rethink how we think and embrace the fact that we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned erroneously by those two factors, that white supremacy forces us to have a sense of dominance and competitiveness versus collaboration. And so as soon as we have opportunity to, I use the phrase, throw somebody under the bus, like you said, when the Asians, and being responsible, anything that we can put externally and blame someone for, we tend to do that. And I think that just keeps us from that sense of accountability that, my thinking is screwed up. We're psychotic. And until we embrace that psychotic behavior, we'll continue.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that psychosis is it's a white psychosis, or do you think that we all have that?
There is definitely a white
tendency or desire to blame someone else.
Yeah, I think it comes from, I'll use the phrase white supremacist culture, that white dominance culture. And but as a result of it, you cannot hold somebody hostage for 400 years, and there's some level of psychosis that begin for those who are oppressed. So we have some work to get through. I look at it from the standpoint of an abused wife. He said, congratulations to my brother who's been married 31 years. But if you had 31 years of an abused marriage and your husband dropped dead with a massive heart attack, you're going to be just as ignorant as you were before he died. You're going to be just as clueless, just as fearful, just as not knowing anything to do because your whole existence has been inside of that oppression. So therefore, as you say, did it start with whites? Yeah, it started with the behavior that's a psychotic person who wants to do what we saw or what we see, but it does have an impact on the mindset of those who are oppressed. So like I say, it's a lot of introspection that has to happen and to go very deep to the conditioning and how we change our own frame of reference for ourselves individually before we can ever help those outside of us. That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can we hear from?
I'll jump in.
Thanks, Wyman.
You mentioned the marriage. I use a marriage analogy as well to explain to folks. And I said it's an abusive relationship. If you're in an abusive marriage and your spouse was beating you down, black and blue, every year, not for 31 years, but for 450 years. Okay. But because, a lot of times folks in abusive relationships, they still say that they love their spouse and they won't leave, even though they have the opportunity to. And for some reason, even after all the years of abuse, they still look to them hoping that they will return the love that they've given them, only to be rebuffed again and again and again. The difference, though, is in an abusive relationship, you can file for divorce. Black America ain't going anywhere. Okay? So therein lies the challenge. Somebody's got to change, instead of saying, hey, can you forgive them? I heard somebody say today, says, yeah, but can you stop doing the things that require you to be forgiven over 400 years? Right? So that's the question that we hate to embrace. And a lot of folks, just the discussion about race makes some people uncomfortable. I was sharing with the brother the other day the third stanza of the Star-Spangled Banner. He didn't know it existed. Much of America doesn't know it existed. So when you talk about this country was founded in Christian beliefs, the third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner begs to differ. The fact that we're treated less than equal, 2/3 of a man from a voting, is not what God says when he says he's no respecter of persons, right? So throughout, there's been this contradiction, and the things that contradict the rhetoric that we hear is not in the history books, right? And it's not being taught. And I think it's not laughable, but it's sad that that the two places President Trump decided to have his coming out party with regards to post-COVID, Tulsa, Oklahoma on June the 19th, and then in Jacksonville, Florida for the convention. You can't find too many places in America where atrocities have not occurred against Black Americans. And that was like exhibit A, right? You know, and either he was ignorant of it, or the fact that he knew about it in advance, or at least had somebody on his staff that could have told him.
Somebody.
Indicates that he's saying whose president he is. That's a statement that's being made when you want to hold a rally on Juneteenth and then hold your convention acceptance speech on the anniversary of Axe Handle Sunday, Saturday in Jacksonville, Florida, which was one of the bloodiest occurrences in the state of Florida during the Civil Rights Act. So an abusive relationship, the abuser doesn't care if it hurts your feelings.
Right.
Exactly.
And what's worse, when you dare to ask for equal treatment, they make you feel like you're out of line and you should be happy you're in a marriage. You should be happy you're in the United States. If you don't like it, leave. That's the rhetoric you get, right? And I could see, like you're saying, after 31 years, if you leave, you're just as ignorant as you were before. Well, we're not ignorant, right? Like the kids say, you know, we are woke. We know what time it is, and we know what's going on. And I believe, you know, this is an opportunity for some substantive change if we get out to vote.
Yeah. And I just want to add about the statement of ignorance, what I meant when you're, I should say you're unskilled and unexposed if you've been sheltered away. So now you have this new world of discovery. And we're not going to allow anyone to impede our pathway of discovery. As we're learning and improving and understanding even better systems. I always say, let's not forget, African Americans have been vital to the human experience because they are the only culture that has raised other awareness of how humans should be treated. We have raised the consciousness of humanity for years.
Yes.
Like we talk about slavery in America based on Christian principles, and they all missed the book of Exodus. The whole history and the story of slavery for years, and they all missed that. And for hundreds of years, preached from the Bible and enslaved. So we have to understand, like I said, there's some rhetoric, there's some conditioning, and this goes way back, even before coming, you know, to America. It was the value that they didn't want to accept on the culture. And now because they imposed these inflictions and got away with it so many years, it's just killing them that they have to embrace. It was us who decided that this was a culture inferior to us. And then any other way, everyone has their areas of superiority.
Yes.
And I often remind people as Black people, go back to when they were going across the Atlantic Ocean to get us. There was no GPS system. There was no forecast of a hurricane coming. They risked that ocean. And nobody would risk the ocean and that for savages, as we were made to see in the media for many years. But they knew there was value. And if they could get people to this land, not just that they could work in this land, what these people could create in this land. And so I often challenge President Trump, when you say make America great again, which era are you speaking? When Black folks made it the great country, or when you was disillusioned to think white folks did it? Because this has been Black folks making this happen. And that's why I encourage Blacks today. Hey, look, you've been making this happen a long time. Our ancestors have been making this happen a long time. Now let's step into what's rightfully ourself, our sense of self. Like I say, well, we are awake. And apologies to those who refuse to awaken, no matter what your race is. We are going to wake up this time. 2020 is a year of clarity. Vision 2020, when we correct our lens, we see vision 2020. This is not going to be the same. It's impossible to ever be the same again. So get ready for a new world we get to create.
There, I see you nodding your head. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I want to talk about the analogy that we use a lot, which is the battered spouse syndrome, right? And we compare that a lot to how African Americans or Black people are treated in this country, and I see the similarities. But what I don't see in that is the difference is, like, if a wife is being beaten by her husband and she does not want help, you can't force her to testify against her, right? I see a similarity there. Like, if Black people don't want to help themselves, you can't force them to help themselves. I see that similarity. I see the syndrome similarity. What I see different, though, is if the person being abused does want help, there are systems in place to get them that help, right? Beyond just filing for divorce, there's actually shelters for them. There's there's like organizations dedicated to providing the aid for transitioning them out and helping them go. Whereas as Black people in America, we don't have those systems, right? Those systems don't exist. There is no third party that says, if you are Black in America, you've been mistreated, come to me, let me help you, like, go. That doesn't exist. So when we make that analogy, because that doesn't exist, it kind of seems hopeless, right? And I almost challenge us, like, what other analogy, if we need one, what other analogy can we use? Because that one doesn't have the same exit path to success as Black people. We don't have that option, which that syndrome wife or person does have, and that's the case.
And that is so true. We don't have that support system at all. And that's the uncomfortable conversation that white Americans don't like to have. That's why they don't want to talk about racism, because they have a responsibility to put those systems in place. And there are some governmental requirements to put those systems in place. No one has wanted to put those systems in place, but they say, Dr. King says it's best. You say, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, so we don't have on a pair of boots.
Right.
I can't pull myself up with my bootstraps because I don't have any boots. And everything about the economic base, which is why slavery existed, we were denied ownership of land. How can I pull myself up if I can't even own land or farm? And then he put us in the whole sharecropper thing. Mm-hmm. So we were always behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
Malcolm X said around the same time, though, the Nation of Islam, like, I don't, just because you brought up King, I want to bring up X at the same time, right? Like, I'm agnostic of religion. Like, I don't have a certain religion, so I'm not pitching or anything. But I'm saying, at the same time, if we don't have boots on, X gave us a plan that said, if we were religious under the Nation of Islam, for example, right now we actually have a religion that we can stand on, like, as a pair of boots. Or if we look at a Marcus Garvey's plan and say we're going Pan-African, right? Now we have a pair of boots. Like, we haven't. I agree with you. We haven't put on a pair of boots, whether it's a religious group that we all affiliate with, because we've all been stripped of the culture, right? America, period, has been stripped of their culture. Not just Black Americans, even white Americans have been stripped of their culture, because if you really think about it, white is just something that they use to blend over Swedish, Italian, like German, French. All of that is like swept under this one thing of white, right? And then all the different African nations and Caribbean nations we come from is all swept under Black. So we all, neither one of us has it, but white America has taken America for them. Like, they've made that their pair of boots, and we haven't made it our pair of boots. So, like, I almost feel like as Black people, we have to choose. Are we going to say America is ours just as much as it is yours, so give me them damn boots? Or are we going to say we're going to somehow affiliate with, like, Ghana, who's saying, African Americans, come home, we will support you? Because at the end of the day, if I woke up tomorrow and said, you know what, I'm going to affiliate with Ghana, right, and they're giving citizenship to us, and then I get mistreated here in the U.S., now you have an international affair if a Ghanaian citizen is mistreated here in the U.S. But when a Black American is mistreated here, there is no repercussion. There is no one to hold the U.S. accountable for mistreating us, because we don't even have human rights. We only have civil rights to this point.
You know, and I think that's a powerful point. That's why I said we've been at this now 50 years, just a little over 50 years. And thanks to the Nation of Islam, I follow Farrakhan. I'm not a devout worshiper of his faith or whatever, but I look for economic base. America is based on about economics. And I think we have opportunities now. No one's going to throw in the towel for us to do it. We're doing it ourselves. And I think the encouragement now is more of us having to step out of our comfort zones and have these tough conversations. I could go to Africa. Like you say, we could. But I'm like these other folks. You're not going back to Germany. You're not going back to Switzerland. You're not going back to those other areas for your economic empowerment or for your family. And I don't plan to do so either. And I believe we do have some opportunities, that we have some boots now, and we have some proven systems that show that we can make that economic shift. And I think that's what inspires me, that now racism wants to really rear its head up, because now Black folks are owning their space. It's Tulsa, Oklahoma again. When we start taking our space, it's like when a woman stand up to the man, she may get beat down more so, like, get back in your place. And I think all this police brutality, and now that more people are saying, this is the treatment blacks have had, get back in your place. I tell people, the punishment for black folks, I believe, is poverty. Everything they do is to keep us in poverty. That's the punishment for having the audacity to say you don't want to be in this abusive, suppressive relationship with America. We want the same rights. We're not 2/3. That was your definition. So if I said I'm 100% American and black skin, hey, you got to recognize I'm 100% American and black skin. I want the exact same thing. And I'm demanding the same thing. And that's what I teach young people when I mentor in the schools. Hey, there's no we're not going to keep these systems in place. We have to start saying, now that we know, we can research. I think education, like in our state, education is based on the real estate tax dollars. There's no way an affluent neighborhood can educate an impoverished neighborhood on the same scale. We're going to say that cannot be the basis for education. We're going to take this tax base and we're going to allocate it amongst the pupils in the schools of Michigan, and that's the kind of money you get. No more a student gets 5 times as much money because of real estate. We know that doesn't work.
Right.
And we know that's set up to disadvantage people. It can't happen anymore. We're calling this stuff out. It's actively engaged, to me, in a system that you set up to disadvantage us. I'm calling it out and say, now this is what it's going to be. After all, you can't sit in that seat of power unless you're elected in, and you can be recalled. And so I think we just not had enough encouragement to look at this political process, and it's too much stuff on the books that's disadvantaging us. It just can't exist anymore. That's my take on it. Racism is not about white and black. That's the top line. At the end of the day, it's economics and who they think has a right to have a legacy wealth. Mm-hmm. That's my take.
This is very interesting to me. Yeah.
I see you nodding your head.
Well, the analogy of the abused partner in a relationship, it resonates with me because just growing up, I've always loved America and just felt so proud to be an American. And then as I became an adult and I became more aware of what really was America, it didn't diminish my love for America. I'm still standing there like, I'm an American, I'm proud of America. But recently, in the last few years, I feel that the American flag, for example, is weaponized against me. This is not your flag. I feel like when I see a flag waving on the street or on someone's truck or something, somehow it's been able to hurt me a little bit. And I think it is related to that sort of looking for my place in this. I know that I am American. Like you said, I'm a Black American. I'm in that skin. And yet somehow I'm not a whole American. I'm being prevented from enjoying the American dream, the American promise, American exceptionalism. You know,
I don't even. You mentioned the flag today. I was driving down the freeway over to my sister's, and so there was this a Trump supporter. He had the American flag, and he had the flag to say, "I support Trump." And so, as you said, the flag has been, pledge allegiance to the flag has changed. That flag, and now it's like it's representing something else.
Something else.
Almost to the point like it's the freaking Confederate flag. I'm like, y'all got to get there with this flag system here. I have rights. Once we say we wave the flag for the land of the free, all of a sudden you gonna take offense when I'm demanding my freedom. And using that flag as the same representation. So now it doesn't represent freedom for all of us. And when there's, acknowledgement of the flag, make sure it has full reign for everyone. Oh, you're disavowing the flag. No. I'm saying I'm holding that flag accountable for what it's supposed to serve in my life, just like it's for you.
Yeah.
If you got a problem with that, I'm gonna say I'm not gonna get on till you make this flag equal to represent all of us.
Kimle, I want to ask you and everyone here kind of a question, right? Because I've heard you say now like a couple of times you have rights, and when is the last time, like honestly, all of us have actually read the Constitution and all of its amendments? Has anyone read it in the last year?
I only read the 13 last night.
I've read it in the last year.
All right. The reason I bring that up, right? I glossed over it. Let's say it needs more reading, but if you read the 13th, the 15th, and the 18th Amendment, the 13th starts to give people of all colors and who are born in this country rights of a citizen, right? And then the 15th comes along and gives people the right to vote who were born. And it's like, why would we need to get the right to vote if we already were given the rights of citizens in number 13? And that didn't happen for a year later. So that means they gave us rights, but we still weren't allowed to vote because people were still stopping it. And then they had to give us the right to vote. And then it wasn't until the 18th, which was years later, that actually gave women the right to vote. So it's like we're saying we have rights, but they didn't get on the books until later. And are they actually still even being followed? And as far as like the one that abolished slavery, as we know, that technically didn't abolish slavery. It just changed the way slaves can be had, right? So when we talk about, yeah, we have rights, I'm an American, I have rights. Our rights are amendments. They're not written into like the foundation of this country. So an amendment is just put thereafter. An amendment can be taken away, interpreted, changed. And it's like, I look at it and I'm like, I don't really know I'm not really sure how much rights we have. I know, like I said earlier, we have civil rights, but why would humans need civil rights? Why wouldn't humans just have human rights? And because we're still considered 3/5 of a human, not just by voting right, we're still considered 3/5 because of the fact that they have to amend the document to take care of us.
And that is a very powerful point. The rights that we say we're searching for have to be legislated for us, but it wasn't legislated for other people. You know, why are you going to legislate our rights? You didn't legislate your rights. Right. That's why I say, you know, fuck that. I don't need you to legislate my rights. My rights are the rights I'm pursuing and teaching people to have. As a human, you have rights as a human. If America didn't grant those to you, and that's the ugly conversation racists don't want to talk about, because we're calling out this, what is it? Hypocrisy. You claim it's the land of the free, and it never has been. And you need to address that. Not me. You need to address that as white people. You know, I told, you know, I'm the president of the Association of Black Women in Construction. And there was also an organization called the National Association of Women in Construction. So I was asked, well, why do you guys need an Association of Black Women in Construction? We already have the National Association of Women in Construction. I said, because the last time I checked, white people didn't give a damn that Black people didn't have the same liberties. In the same free world, you didn't make sure we had it. So we got to make sure we got our own rights. So we have the Black Association for Women in Construction. Now, if you take care of yours and you're not taking care of all of us, I'm going to be in the same situation. So I don't have a problem with saying Black Chambers of Commerce, Black Women in Construction. I have to ensure that my Black children that follow me know that they have rights that are not granted to them. They were born with them. You've been in the way of my inherent rights. And I think if we start looking at it from that standpoint, whites hold some accountability to how they claim to defend this flag. You know, how they claim to be doing all this other stuff in the name of the flag. But the name of the flag, like you say, required another 18 amendments.
Yeah. I think when it comes to flags, I use the Confederate flag, right? You know, right here in Jacksonville, you know, monuments came down. It's kind of funny, right? I'm gonna tell you the backstory behind that. Jacksonville, as you know, is hosting the Republican convention, right? It was somebody said it was a competition of one. Every other major city in Florida has a Democratic mayor. Jacksonville was the only one with a Republican mayor, right? Just set that aside for a second. The mayor's been pushing back on removal of Confederate monuments since he got in office. This is his second term, so he's in his 6th year. All of a sudden, on a Saturday night, he removes the monument. On Monday, he announces the RNC's coming to Jacksonville. Right? It's okie doke. You know, like you said, stay woke, you can figure it out. You read the tea leaves. But I will tell you this, he who has the most facts wins. That's why we got to know our history. That's why when Drew Brees was the greatest gift to us on the planet, when he said, I will never defend anyone kneeling for the national anthem. My grandfather fought in World War II, the greatest generation, yada, yada, yada. Fact. African Americans have fought in every war that has occurred in the United States of America, including the Revolutionary War, where African American took the first bullet for our freedom from England.
Christmas
Right?
addicts.
Right? We know that. World War II, we fought right alongside Drew Brees' grandfather, great-grandfather. We won. And by the way, as a footnote, America has a bad habit of getting selective amnesia. When they start dissing our brothers down in Puerto Rico, we need to remind them they were annexed specifically so we could use their men in our uniforms and fight for America in the World War. We invited them to the party. They didn't invite themselves to the party. So when we talk bad about them and the 51st state and all this stuff, remember, America needed them. They didn't need us. They could have stayed in the Caribbean and stayed out of the conflict. They got them. But we forget about that. Getting back to World War II, when we came back, we weren't greeted with ticker tape parades. We had to ride in the back of the bus if we could get a ride at all. Our cities were still burned down. Rosewood right here in Florida, burned to the ground, right? Government sanctions, Tulsa, government sanction, terrorism, domestic terrorism in its purest form. And so Drew Brees' grandfather looks at the flag that greeted him as a hero, honored him as the greatest generation. I can understand why he would have such reverence. But my grandfather, your grandfathers, most of you, that American flag was still a symbol. As the brother mentioned, slavery ended, but it just reshifted. It's called the prison farm system. The P farm system started immediately after the abolition of slavery, because now folks who couldn't own property, couldn't get a job, couldn't get education, they would lock them up for vagrancy. And now they would lease them out back to the same plantations and steel mills in Birmingham and elsewhere, right? At a pennies on the dollar for what a real wage would cost. And that's how the penal system, in that whole complex was created. The P farm system was an extension of slavery, and that all was under the American flag. So when you put the facts out like that, and you ask them, and I love Malcolm X, right? I believe he was interviewed by Dan Rather, and he asked a question, hey, Malcolm X, do you hate white people? And he responded, if people raped your mothers and your daughters, took your property, hung you without a trial, would you hate them? Drop mic at that point. Yeah. And so when you ask them, if you came up on the flag where all of this was going on, right? And by the way, if white privilege wasn't real, why did you fight so hard to protect it? The human rights legislation, which they call civil rights, the only reason it was there, they fought so hard against it because that means that privilege that was afforded them to drink in any water fountain they wanted, stay in any hotel they wanted, eat in any restaurant, that's privilege. And civil rights, equal rights, was taking that privilege away, and they fought tooth and nail to protect it.
Yes, they did.
So why would you deny something that you fought so hard to afford us? Because you thought you were losing something of value, right? Again, everything I just said has facts and dates to go with it, right? And so if someone denies those, then they're a fool, and you need to stop arguing with them because you're a bigger fool than they are if you continue. Right? I mean, but we need to know our history. And unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that don't know that history. It's almost like we need just like they have apologetics for religion, we become very well versed in how to defend our positions with facts.
Yes, I agree with that. It was funny because I was just sharing with Chris earlier today. I did a project with Ford Motor Company. Now we're in Detroit, and Dearborn is a neighboring city. Ford Motor Company has never done anything in the city of Detroit in all these hundreds of years in the automotive industry. So I was spearheading a project, and they were talking about doing mobility solutions with the Uber and the Lyft entering the world. How do they make money? We were doing studies in all parts of the world, Rio de Janeiro, parts of India I can't even pronounce, and everywhere, Japan, Europe. And I said, well, people in Detroit can't even get to a job right now. Black folks in Detroit can't get to a job, and you're right in your own backyard. Why don't we do a Detroit challenge study? And so they said, okay. And we started, it was initiative by the chairman, Bill Ford. So we got the green light to start, and we did all the research in the state. I'm a researcher by profession. And we're going about the process. So we had to do a tour through the city of Detroit. Now, the city of Detroit is horrible. It's come back in the last 5 years, yes, in our downtown, but the regional neighborhoods and the business districts have been burned down since the 60s. And so we're taking this tour, and the people are asking, wow, all this happened from the recession in 2008? This is 2017. I said, no, dear. This was never rebuilt after the riots. With the white migration that left and the money that went with them, it was never rebuilt. Now, it's strange today, all the whites are coming back to reclaim those neighborhoods, and we call that gentrification. But there's been nothing done since the white migration in the 60s, and here it is 2016, 17, 18. Now their children and grandchildren want to come back, and we call it gentrification. Bettering these neighborhoods, they bring in a higher income, so they get total rights to what they do. Existing residents pretty much have no voice, which are predominantly poor blacks, who, like we say, withstood all of the city of Detroit when all the lights went out. Now they have no voice in all this white renovation, as they call it, and gentrification, and improving neighborhoods. I said it's all economics. But we don't want to have the conversation. They never knew that there was a white migration. In the 60s, they didn't want their kids in our schools. They left. They built new suburbs that didn't even exist. They went to farmlands and built subdivisions. Yeah. But no one wants to have that conversation. A lot of people don't know historically. So we're only talking in the last 55 years that we've been trying to get those civil liberties, those rights to drink out of the same fountain. It's only 55 years. Yeah. So now they want to come back, and we call it gentrification. But it's still based on the same premise. Right. That they have a better voice than your voice.
Right. The same thing is happening in Atlanta already with gentrification. Same thing is happening in D.C. And so any major urban city.
Major urban cities were.
I live right now in Roxbury in Boston, where I love, during this quarantine, I've been taking walks. Beautiful homes, these beautiful old homes, a little rundown, but now every other one, you see them fixing it up, and I see now it's being gentrified. These beautiful homes are now going to be subdivided into condos that are, costing up to $1 million in a place where, a friend of mine bought a house for $105,000 8 years ago. And it's just one part of a horrible change that I see in Boston that scares me. And I started seeing it a couple years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when my daughter was going from elementary school to high school. So she was leaving the neighborhood elementary school, and there was a huge call from the white parents to go back to neighborhood schools, which they were presenting as a way to make the schools better. But what I saw was a way to resegregate the schools, and it happened. And now Boston is talking about poor school performance again. And it's disgusting. It's confusing. I don't understand. I shouldn't say I don't understand how they don't see what has happened, because they did it. They did it on purpose. And the frustrating thing for me is not knowing how to stop it.
So that becomes, you see this stuff so blatant in our face. I think for us to be almost like, is this really happening? It's almost like, what?
Right.
In 2020? Right. That's how I feel sometimes, like, seriously? Let me go have a conversation with these people.
Yes.
So, like they used to call us you people.
Yes.
You people.
Sure they do.
I say these people.
These people.
Let me have a conversation with these people. These people are still confused.
Here's an angle that I think you talk about, the psychosis of a racist. If in the game, anybody ever played Marco Polo when you're a kid, you kind of hold the person down at the bottom of the pool. You don't want to be too mean to them, because sooner or later they're gonna get a breath of air, and you don't want them to treat you the way they treated them, right? you know, for those who are a staunch right wingers, always, you know, holding up the Bible, you know, you can't ignore that verse that you're going to reap what you sow. Right? You can't reverse it on it. You can't hope for crop failure. Right. They've been planting a whole lot of seed that they're not going to want to reap. And what is happening when you look at the browning of America, right? We're only, I think, maybe 2, maybe 3 electoral cycles away from majority being minority. They know the numbers, right? Yeah. And so when people are cornered and people get desperate, they do desperate things. So what you see is I believe the manifestation of, man, if we don't do something now, yeah, okay, and so that's why you get bolder, right, more brazen, right, and it's still so unlike, you know, going back to the marriage analogy, that's why I was said, unlike an abusive marriage, there's no filing for divorce here, because we not going anywhere. This reminds me of Sophia when she came back in The Color Purple. Sophia home now.
Yeah. I want to add
Don't be changing around here. Sophia's home now.
Because you start demanding.
One little thing to that, brother. You said earlier, someone said that we have unprogramming to do, right? And deprogramming to do. And one little thing I'm just questioning it, right? When you said we're a couple electoral cycles away from the majority being the minority, right? Why wouldn't that is another way of saying that the majority is flipping, right? Instead of still calling us the minority as we become the majority, because that in itself is keeping us to think that we are still less than, right? So I'm questioning, like, that's part of the language that we even use on a daily basis. Like, even if we're 10 black, even right now on this call, right? We may, which we shouldn't, but we may refer to ourselves as minorities, but right now we're not. We're the majority. Like, Kristen's the minority here, right? We are the majority. So, like, being conscious of saying, like, that was intentional, calling us the minority, to keep it that way. Because even if you go back to slave times, it was one slave owner and a bunch of slaves. We were never actually the minority, right? We always were the majority.
Somebody. That's
right?
what I'm talking about.
That. So,
yeah.
Conditioning.
Yeah.
I want to hear from Ionnie. Is it Ionnie? How do you say it?
Ionnie?
Yeah, I want to hear what you got to say.
So I think you make a really good point. I forgot who said it, but I did hear it from another ancestor. Actually, my first quote is attributed to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's mentor, who is actually Dr. Neely Fuller. But I do believe this quote comes from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's ISIS paper, which goes to your point. White people make up 10% of the world's population, and how we came to name ourselves minority is that you take the majority population and then segment them. This one's black, this one's Hispanic, this one's Asian, this is other. And that's the only way that you can create a minority from the majority. Right. It is mental programming. So definitely going back to Kimle's very first statements. I know that personally I'm in and have been for years now in my own deprogramming cycle. So the other ancestor that I wanted to invoke, and the reason, if you realize that I'm not saying anything new, is because, number one, I'm tired of talking. There's nothing that I'm going to say that is going to be new. And for anybody that's listening to this, I think it's more important to read and listen to the works of our forefathers who have written extensively about this. Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakin, Dr. Amos Wilson says, if you understand any problem in America, you need to focus on who profits from that problem, not who suffers from that problem. And I'll end by saying this. One of the most striking photos I've ever seen is when, I forget the name of the girl, but when you see the black students walking into their high school, And in all of those iconic photos, what is very interesting to me is that the gaze is always on the Black people and what the Black people did or why they should be where they are. But what's really striking, if you even pull up this photo, there is a white woman in the crowd vehemently yelling, screaming at this girl walking to her high school. And it's so striking to me because the white girl's mouth is like, I mean, wide agape. And to not have the gaze on white people, you know, it's like, don't look at the one that's on the table. Look at, Kimle said it already, look at the psychosis of the doctor that's describing or prescribing the problem or diagnosing a problem. A lot of it doesn't even exist. It's all in their head. It's a faction of their imagination. So I'm not invested in solving white people's problem. I told my brother when all of this popped off, and he works for a company in Silicon Valley, and I have a friend who works at a library, which is generally a all-white institution, and the kind of anxiety that they had to face, and going back into these spaces, knowing that their white coworkers, and white superiors, managers who didn't even acknowledge them before Mr. Floyd got killed, are now turning to them, talking about, what can I do? Are you okay? And what I advise my brother, and what I want to say on this call is, if you are white and you care that much to say something to a Black person, don't say it. Turn around, address the public defense attorney or the prosecutor's office, and make your care be known to your brothers and sisters. Because I just finished Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon today, and it already lays out what just happened in the book. White people not listening to Black people. White people really only respect other white people. So if you really want to help us, go ahead, even without our permission, and talk to your own kind on our behalf, and you work it out on yourselves. Because it's not our responsibility to be educating you, to be reminding you, to be your conscious, you know, I mean, and I do think that this is actually going to be the end of it, because the amount of people that are turning up in cities around the country and the world, there are even more silent people that are so fed up that you don't even hear about.
Right.
It's going to be a movement that, you know, it really is kind of like the last bubbling coming to a head, going to Wyman's point, you know, and I'm patiently waiting. I'm doing my work, but I'm patiently waiting, because, you know, more often than not, I'm not thinking about white people, you know, because that's a whole nother inflicting of trauma that I don't want to continue. And my time and energy is better spent elsewhere.
For Chris and the community, I am going to have to sign off. You guys can continue the conversation. I would like to close with Dr. Naeem Akbar, who says, I am not anti-white, I am just pro-Black. And so therefore, my message right now is giving Black people the information, the remembrance, awakening who we are, and doing what we do best, and that's thrive, and that's become amazing, as we have always done. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. And you guys continue. Like I said, I am at an event, and so I do need to go on to the next stage here, but it's been an honor to be a part of this conversation. And I'm just now focusing on being pro-Black and making sure that we have generations that follow us that are fully awakened to their capacity.
Thank you,
So
Kimle. Happy birthday to your
Thank you,
sister.
Kimle.
Thanks so much for being
Thank
here.
you
Thank
so
you,
much,
guys.
Kimle.
All right. Bye.
And
So,
Chris, I have to actually sign off too.
Oh,
But thank you
Connect-
again for the
can you
invitation.
connect us
And
all?
thank you for all of the panelists on too.
yeah. Thank you, Ionnie. I really appreciate your
Good to see you,
insight.
Ionnie.
You're welcome. Good to see you too, Mama.
In answer to your question, Lucky, yes, I will connect everybody. You want just a group email?
Sure, that would be helpful. And Sister Sarah, you would appoint. I will have to leave in a second too, but and before we go, you had a point about the school systems. I think someone mentioned about the school. I think it was Kimle. You mentioned about the school systems no longer just being based off taxes, or maybe it was you. I don't know who.
She had said that
Okay.
we can't keep doing that. That's, you know.
Yeah, we can't keep doing that. And you talked about gentrification a little bit, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I live in JP, so we're neighbors, right?
Oh,
right
so
there.
right, you're seeing it for sure.
It's on the street. It's on the street.
It
Like
is.
you go
Oh,
the one block, Center Street. You go from, and this is not a knock against any whole chain. Not that I care because I don't know, but you have Stop and Shop on one end, right? And you have Whole Foods on the other end. As you get closer to the Whole Foods, the houses are a little nicer. As you go closer to Stop and Shop, it's apartments for rent.
triple
And
deckers.
mind you, right? And the beauty of it is, it's the same thing. They're triple deckers next to Stop and Shop, and they're triple deckers next to Whole Foods. But next to Whole Foods, they're condominiums, right? Next to Stop and Shop, they're apartments for rent. And the person that owns it, and this is oversimplified, but you get young 20-something-year-olds in those condos, and their parents own the apartment building down the street, or their grandparents own the apartment building down the street, being rented out to the young families of color, right? And I look at, like, I used to live in Lawrence when I went to Merrimack College. I look at Lawrence and I talk to my friends in Lawrence about real estate, and I say, look, right now the game is set up. Tax dollars make the school good. Should we change that? Yeah, we should. But if we can't change that at the moment, right? For the 5 years it might take to change that, let's start to put our tax dollars to work appropriately. If there's only one building, right? One apartment building with let's say it's got 10 units in it. That's one building paying tax, one owner paying tax. Versus if you convert that and it's just paperwork to turn those into condos, right? You don't have to renovate anything. All you got to do is change the paperwork, right? And now there's 10 condos. Now you got 10 condos paying taxes. You got 10 people in the community building wealth, right? And then now you're starting to change the school system. Now you're starting to have a voice because you own property in there and you're deciding where your dollars go. And it's those small changes in the education. It's like a catch-22 cycle because we don't have the education because we don't have the money to make the education better, and then we don't have the money, so like it ends. And I think it ends and it starts though with real estate. And yes, I'm in real estate, Christine's in real estate, right? So and I don't know what you guys do for profession, but I partly got into real estate because I started to understand that, and I said, look, I really got to understand how real estate works so that whatever my kids in the future, I don't even have kids yet, but whatever they decide they want to go after, I'm gonna make sure they understand how real estate works, and real estate controls this entire real estate and racism, the two R's that control this entire country to me, because that's why they took the land from the natives, right? Because once they had the land, that gave them power.
You control the resources,
Exactly. So I feel like the biggest educational thing we have to get to our people, like if I had 3 things that Black people in America need to understand, we need to understand real estate, we need to understand the laws, right? Because the racism is built into the laws. So we have to understand those laws so we know which ones to change to make sure we have the rights we need to have as people, right? And then we need to make sure we understand how real estate works because that controls everything else.
Yeah. That's right. That is the way for wealth. You're right.
And land ownership's always been huge. I mean, all the wars in the world, right, have been fought for real estate. And we didn't get to the actual solving of the problem. We got to the identifying the history of the problem.
Those are my 2 tips. If we can figure those out,
so that's really true.
But that's, I want to I played a little bit of a devil's advocate though, because I mean, it seems like So I was brought up, I'm in from a poor family. We didn't have, I had to learn about real estate on my own as well. Just like you, Lucky, you say, gee, look at this. It took me a while to figure out, hey, if I want to get anything, if I want to be somebody, if I want to have a life, I'm going to need to figure out these specific things. And I guess I feel like maybe the enemy is, there are two enemies. If you want to have good guys and bad guys, there's the people who already have things that are working really hard to keep them by, keeping other people from getting them, right? They're hoarding, they're making laws, they're doing things. But then there's another whole group, which I think maybe is more of us, us being, white people, where we just don't have a clue that all this other stuff is going on because we're not part of the, the hoarding of the huge resources. We don't have money, we don't have land, we don't have anything, but we're also not aware of all the things that are being done to keep other people from having those things. So when we, what it's taken me, okay, I'm 50, what am I? Say 50, let's say I'm 57. I think that's right. I might only be 56. I'm not sure. But anyway, I can't do math right now. It's taken me this long to figure out how different our experiences are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, I thought it was good that I was, colorblind. I thought it was good that I just thought everybody was the same. And I was educated to be told, I was then educated by friends, by other folks to say, no, that's not good. It's not good for you to say, oh, everybody's the same, because that you're diminishing the situation that we're in. You're diminishing our experience of the world. So that's why I wanted to invite you all here, because I'm educating myself and hopefully educating some other people as well. People who are not part of the, trying to keep your kids from going to a decent school, people who are just completely clueless about what's actually going on. So what was my point for all this? I'm not sure.
It sounds like the person you're describing, right, or saying that you might have been, sounds like the type of person who says, well, I'm white and I didn't have any privilege, so what is this white privilege you speak of, right? And to my brother's point, how do you say your name?
Wyman. He's Wyman.
Wyman, right?
Yeah, his name on his thing is all mixed up because
yeah, I didn't know what that was, man.
Yes.
we need education. Whoever has the most facts wins. We need to educate all of us on how to dismantle those arguments that are nonsensical. But if you don't know that they're nonsensical, you start to believe in it, right? Because it's like when you're a kid, you hear a fairy tale. It's completely nonsensical, but you believe in it because that's what the person's telling you, and you're like, you have no other facts to prove it wrong. So we need to make sure we say that. Like when I see people make that argument, I'm white, I've had hardships, whatever. The best explanation I've ever seen of white privilege is simple. It's that you may have hardships, and the hardships you have are real, and no one take those away from you. But none of those hardships came because of the color of your skin, right? And when you say it that simple, it's impossible to refute, right? They can think, if they're a logical person, they can think through their mind and realize that any hardship they face, none of it was in America was caused because they're white. It was caused for some other reason. While a person of color, a black person, will have all the same hardships, and then if both people take the same actions, that black person still may face a slowdown, right, because of the color of their skin.
Yeah, and lucky, the other thing is, you, if you were in an era where you could, as I mentioned, go to any school you wanted to, go to any restaurant you wanted to, buy real estate in any neighborhood you wanted to, that's privilege.
Yep.
There's a videotape. If you look it up on YouTube, it's called "I'm White, I'm Free, and I'm 21." All right, so it lists about 14 or 15 clips from Hollywood movies back in the era where that was in the script, because that was the mindset of the day, right? And so even though you may not have been, quote unquote, wealthy or in the decision makers, privilege allowed you to benefit from the rules of the day, okay? And so you were able to take advantage of it. So privilege does not have anything to do with one's bank account.
Right.
That's the thing. And when you say this, you got to say it. Hey, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty or shame. That's not what this is about. I just want to, like the kids say, I just want to drop some knowledge on you so you'll understand, right, the basis from where my perspective, because we see life and hear life through the lens of our experience. So that's why I'm not mad at Drew Brees. He was being honest and sincere.
Right.
Because his experience didn't include having to worry about which towns in Florida you would never get caught in after sundown to this day, right? Dylan Ruth shoots a mass murderer, shoots 9 people in a church. The police arrest him. He complains about being hungry. They took him by Burger King before they booked him. And that most white Americans don't know that. Would that have happened to an African-American child? A mass murderer? Absolutely not. So even a mass murderer still takes advantage of white privilege. About right now, I'll be looking for some amens in the church, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, you're
true.
right. But they that will be diffused, and I say that will be diffused. I watch social media a lot, man. I'm on Facebook a lot, and especially these days, watching how people react to these examples, right? Because that is a what we call a meme, right? There's a picture of him, right? And they explain that, and it gets shared by some people. And I watch people defend it by saying, that's not white people. That's a white person that did that, right? That one individual cop decided that, and that cop doesn't represent all of us. And then that exact rhetoric I've also seen used when someone said, you're asking for us to protest peacefully, but you shot, and you use MLK as an example, but you shot MLK for peacefully protesting. And then the rhetoric is used again. White people didn't shoot MLK. A white person shot MLK. So wait, what I talk to some people about, and we get into it, right? Some young Black people, we're talking about, what this change looks like. And we often argue about, because I look at it and I say, if you're going to put the rhetoric out there, it has to be something that the lowest common denominator can't even refute. Because that, if you leave any room for it, they will make nonsensical arguments like that and then run with that. It needs to be something that their white friend who may have a little bit of common sense looks at it and says, if you disagree with that, I have no choice but to really understand that you are dumb and or racist, and I have to disassociate with that. But if you leave a little bit of room that the ignorant person can make an ignorant statement like, white people didn't shoot him, that was one white person, then you leave room for that neutral person to say, well, it's comfy here, there's no need to move yet, right? It's not that bad yet. And we have to be really intentional about that.
Yeah. I just posted something. In fact, Christian, I posted on NSA, a defensive ear cannot hear. A defensive ear cannot hear the truth, right? A defensive eye cannot see sunlight. Even when you turn the lights on, they're still in the dark. And so those people that you're talking about, Lucky, they're not listening to understand you. They're listening just enough so they can defend their position. And in the absence of real facts, they'll try to use a global argument, right? And so when you hear that, this is when you're having a dialogue with a fool, and you just need to disengage, because you don't need to cast your pearls amongst the swine. It's a waste of time. It's like when you look at the Iranians in their formal schools, they're taught that the Holocaust did not happen. So if I get into a conversation, Ahmadinejad and all those guys, they don't believe, they are taught that it did not happen. So when I get in a conversation with them about the Holocaust, and that aspect of their training comes in, the conversation's over. I'm not wasting my breath. That's what Ionnie is saying, right? If you argue with a fool, you're a bigger fool than they are.
Yep. So Ionnie, I hear you and Ionnie's point. I agree with, right? And at the same time, I challenge among us as Black people, right? Because I look at it as from strictly a problem-solving situation. I'm trying to figure out, there's a problem, what do we do with it? I see 2 routes, right? Black people in America can say, we are our own people. We are Like we are our own group within America from that, in theory, right? Just go with this for a second. In theory, Maryland, Baltimore, like that's ours now. Like that whole, like that's us. That's the Republic of Black America, and we're here, but don't mess with us. That's us. Like we're gonna have our own laws, our own constitution. We're our own people. We just coexist on this land, like Haiti and Santo Domingo, right? We are two separate countries on this land now, and leave us alone. Or we are American, like we are equally as American, and you're gonna give us that equalness as American. And the reason I say that, because the reason you have to not argue, but you have to convince that quote unquote fool is because how many of those quote unquote fools are there in America, right? Because I'll tell you how many there are. There's enough to vote for the current system that we have to stay in place. There's enough of them in this country for the two candidates that we have going for presidency to be the two candidates that we have going for presidency, right? So if there's like, in our circles, we all seem to be educated people. There might not be that many of them in our circles, but that's our own echo chamber. We don't know how many of them actually live in this country with us. So we have to be able to communicate effectively with them and place logic on them. Otherwise, they will outnumber us when it comes time to vote, and our candidates won't make it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the two, at least from my perspective, saying that are opposed, right? All I'm saying is what Christine was saying. Hey, I'm colorblind. I don't want you to be colorblind. I want you to see my blackness, my melanated skin, and still appreciate me for who I am. Right? I don't want you to look past that because God gave it to me. I'm proud of it. Right? It's
part of me. It's
exactly.
part of what makes me me.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So I don't want you to love me or like me because of what I do or what I can do for you. I want you to love me, like me because of who I am. Right, in my totality of my ethnicity and all of that stuff, right? And so what I'm saying is don't waste the time on the fool, because there's another person who's not a fool who hasn't here to listen. I want to, my time is precious, right? So I'm going to lend my voice and my perspective and my analogies to folks who do get it and who do want to understand, and who are not listening with a defensive ear. They're not looking to defend, decades of systemic racism and decades of white privilege. They're willing to listen to understand how they were advantaged by it, and not walk away with a guilt trip or feeling, guilty or shame, but really appreciate my perspective, which they will now incorporate into their perspective going forward. There are a number of people out there. You can't put all people in the same box. Otherwise, we turn around and do the same thing to white folks that they've done for us, right? So I tell people, I'm just one black man. I can't speak of all the Black of America, but here's my perspective, right? And I give it to you like that, right? And I'll treat everyone as an individual. So yeah, I'm with you. We got to use our platform, whatever our sphere of influence is, to educate and inform both whites and blacks, right? The young brothers and sisters, right? You understand what economic empowerment is. Man, let me tell you something. And I use this as an example, like you were talking about investment and being smart. If you heard in the greater Boston area that the big sports retailer there had 40% off on all Nike Air Jordans, 40% off, doors open at 8 a.m. There would be a crowd wrapped around the building. When the stock market was 40% off in March, crickets.
Yeah.
Every stock in Wall Street was 40% off because
Why is that?
It's just information, knowledge, right?
Exactly.
And so that's what I'm saying. That's why we got to use our platform, right? And Christine's heard me say this before. A lot of us are addicted to Starbucks or a Happy Meal. $5. You can't get through the line without dropping $5. $5 a day invested in an index fund in the stock market over a 30-year career will have you $250,000. $250,000, right? Which is 6, 7, 10 times as much as the average American retires with. $10 a day, I have you over $500,000. Right? And so I tell people, young people, if you can't figure this out, and if I see you in 30 years from now when they're just starting and you're not a millionaire, that's on you. Because I just gave you the knowledge, right? It's not whether you can, it's are you willing to do what's necessary? So not only do I inform them, but I challenge them to take action.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I tell them, this is on you. This ain't on Uncle Sam. Can't nobody. And by the way, if you knew that's true, I would get a part-time job just to be able to drop $150 a month into an index fund. If I can have $500,000 waiting on me in 30 years when I retire, right? I mean, just think about it. And you ask them, does that make sense? They can't help but to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to do this? They can't help but to say yes. And when I get down, are you willing to do what's necessary to have this in your pocket when you get to be 55 or 60? And then they get silent, because that's where self-accountability comes in. And at the end of the day, this is where we got to go, right? It's not what they can do to us, but what we're willing to do for ourselves in spite of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when it's raining, I put on a raincoat and go about my business.
Right.
Right?
Before I go, Sarah, I want to hear what you have to say on this, and then I got to hop off of this one too.
Yeah, I've got to go as well. Sarah, come on, help us out.
That's right. No, I agree. I feel like you have to, it's sort of like finding the open door where you can stick your foot in and keep working till you can pry that door open. It's finding the open ear, like you said. If there's this person who is willing to talk to me, I'm going to do what I can to convince this person. I hate that it feels like I'm trying to convince somebody of my worth in your world that's supposed to be our world. But at least then that person will turn around and then hopefully in a conversation, you know, spread the word, so to speak. But at the same time, it's too irresistible to not confront what we'll call the ignorance in the moment, face to face or screen to screen.
Hey.
When it hits you so viscerally.
Yeah,
you know,
you're right. Yeah,
it's really hard, but we tire ourselves out. I've seen so many people say how exhausted they are. You ask a Black person, how are you doing? Exhausted. I'm emotionally exhausted. I'm physically exhausted.
Yeah, I think I'll leave you guys with this. I think I agree with you. Ain't no sense in arguing with them, and I agree with your other point is if we can just drop the nuggets on them and leave them, right? Hit them with the truth. Let someone bear witness to it. So that way, even if they argue with it, right, you're not arguing anymore. You're done. Especially if on a screen, it's easy to do that. You type your sentence and you leave, right? You leave the chat room. Just leave that there. And if they're the one arguing about it, and this is serious. I've seen it. I dropped that white privilege token, or I dropped whatever my little defense is, and I watched other white people start to say, well, you know what? He's right. Like that's it. And I just let them handle it from there. But I make sure that at least it's like a toy car, right? Going down like one of your tracks or whatever, and just a little off track. You just give a little tap to the left, just get it right on the right track. You let it do its thing, right? Yep. It's going and going. You just give it the little tap. That's all I'm doing with them, and then I get out the way and let them handle it.
Hey, Lucky, what you're just saying is, watch this. Profound truth will defend itself.
Yeah,
I guess so.
Profound truth will defend itself, and there's so much at stake. That as far as your yet unborn children, family that you're going to have, there's so much at stake. We can't afford to get tired. Right. That's just like saying, I'm tired of breathing.
Right.
I'm not going to get tired of breathing because I got things to do. I need breath to do it.
Stuff to do.
Right. And so we have the ability to change the world one post at a time, one conversation at a time. And because we have the perspective in order to articulate those profound truths, because God has blessed us and able to articulate that. All right, it's a gift. Our gift back to him is to not put it on the shelf, but put it where people can use it to change their lives and the lives of those who come behind us. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Hey, pleasure to meet you guys. Thank you guys for
Likewise.
putting this together, being here. Thank you all. I
Thanks,
look forward
Lucky.
to the email. I definitely want to connect with you guys. See you later.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lucky. It's
Thanks,
a
Lucky.
Thanks, Christine. I got to get back to my folks myself. Thanks.
Oh,
Hey,
thanks,
Sarah,
Wyman. I'm glad you were able to hop in.
pleasure to meet you, Wyman.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Be blessed.
Bye-bye. Chris, thank you so much for setting this up. I hope it was helpful, and it was definitely helpful for me because